Welcome, future YouTubers. Black Pigeon Speaks is talking about how diversity is not a strength, allegedly, because Japan and COVID-19 demonstrate this. So let's see what he has to say. Black Pigeon Speaks, take it away.
When my older brother used to visit my house, he would always complain as I'd ask him to take off his shoes and leave them at the door. "Why should I? I'll just have to put them back on," he'd say. Fast forward to a night at the local dive bar and 3 pitchers in, and we were both in the men's room, and I'll let you think on the state of the place on a Saturday night. But the only thing I will say is that my brother and his shoes were waiting in a puddle of urine, and I pointed that out to him. I said to him, "These are the same shoes you're going to be wearing across your carpet later tonight at your house, guy." Now, the reason I'm telling you this story, it's an illustration that I'm trying to elucidate that old dogs can learn new tricks. My brother is a combat veteran who takes family portraits wearing a cowboy hat. I'm very serious about that. But he also never wears his shoes in.
So what you're saying is that your brother is as much of a LARPer as you are. Got it.
Doors anymore. The point being, people can learn to change their behavior. And I think now, given that the authorities are convinced that we are in the midst of the greatest challenge we have collectively faced since the Second World War, now might be a good time to take a look at why Japan has, thus far, gotten much less scathed by the coronavirus than its neighbors, and now Europeans.
Okay, so it's telling, I think, that this article that he's citing here is a month old. Let's see what the Japanese numbers are at now. Oh yes, I haven't heard any news out of Japan about coronavirus. And anyone think this video is a month old. My mistake. I thought this was more recent than that. But Japan coronavirus count. Okay. Oh, look at that. Look. I mean, they're still lower than most other places, but let's see. So here's the article. Here's when Black Pigeon Speaks video came out. And here's what's happened since. It looks like they're back on the upsurge. So, yeah. It does look like they've had the surge that was expected. It just took a little bit longer. It has to be said that Japan has a very isolated population as it is. They have one of the biggest issues with what are known as hikikomori, which are essentially shut-ins. They are people who just completely withdraw from society, live in their apartment, and when they need food or other products, they order it and it gets dropped off and they pick it up that way. So the fact that they have a number of people like this already in their society means that they were likely to shut down anyway. So, or there were enough people already socially isolating, social distancing. That explains why it took longer also, they're very insular, so I'm sure it was pretty easy for them to shut down people coming in. But I'm guessing that Black Pigeon Speaks, who is a fascist, or at least plays one on TV, is going to talk about how the homogeneity of their culture either makes them less susceptible to coronavirus or makes it easier for them to lock it down to prevent the infection from spreading, which I don't think I need to bring it back up to show that it didn't really work.
Before this video begins, I would like to encourage new viewers to subscribe to this channel, but more importantly, for returning viewers, please check that you're still subscribed, as I've received thousands of messages from people that have been unsubscribed by YouTube without their knowledge or consent. That said, thanks for arriving via whichever way. And
I love when these people talk about how it's and I've seen this on the left too, to be clear. I have seen people talk about, oh, I know I was following you, but apparently I got unfollowed. Lacking further evidence, I'm always going to assume that when that happens, it's the result of a glitch or some other issue, and not that the company is maliciously unsubscribing people. Like, that just seems ludicrous to me. But maybe I'm the weird one. We'll see.
And let's get started. Starting in China and now Denmark, El Salvador.
One of the worst things about Black Pigeon Speaks is his fucking pretension. Jesus Christ.
France, Ireland, Italy, New Zealand, Poland, Spain, Norway, Belgium, Argentina, Malaysia, as well as several states in the US and London, well, they have all implemented the world's largest and most restrictive mass quarantines in modern history. No matter what happens now, whole nations are calling in sick for a month, and things will not just go back to normal in several weeks. As the virus spreads, more and more people will be put under mandatory lockdown. This footage here was taken in Shinjuku in Tokyo on March the 22nd, 2020. Now, being a neighbor to the epicenter of the outbreak, a coronavirus explosion was expected in Japan. So where is it? People, as you can see, walking about, filling up restaurants, and going about life. There is no curfew in Tokyo. There is no lockdown. This was today at the local supermarket. There's no panic buying. There's no hoarding. While there has been disruption to schools, Japan remains open. While the government contends that it's been very aggressive in identifying clusters, many say that the lower rates of coronavirus are because of a lack of testing, and that is artificially keeping the numbers low, and this could be true, as Japan is hoping to still host the 2020 Olympics later this summer. Conspiracy to keep the numbers down or not, hospitals aren't filling up and ICUs aren't being overwhelmed. In fact, according to Bloomberg, in Tokyo, which is among the world's most densely packed metropolitan areas, cases made up just 0.0008% of the population. The northern main island of Hokkaido, the skiing destination that was Japan's worst hit area, is already lifting a state of emergency as new cases have slowed. So then you have to ask the question, how could things be so different in what is the largest by population city in the world, Tokyo, as well as the rest of Japan, which is just next door to China, and countries as far away as Italy and France? Basically, I think it comes down to two things: habits and culture.
Black Pigeon Speaks is one of these crypto white nationalists. Their argument is, well, yeah, white nations for white people, Africa for Africans, Asia for Asians. This is why he uses Japan, because it's a largely homogenous country. It's overwhelmingly Japanese, overwhelmingly native-born native Japanese people. I mean, there are non-native people there, but it's a tiny percentage relative to other industrialized nations. And he's trying to use this to show that the homogenous culture leads to, that specifically the homogeneity of the culture leads to less impact from coronavirus or something. I'm not sure exactly what his argument is going to be there. Obviously, I haven't watched this video. But that all being said, I do think that he's going to be conflating the Japanese tendency to follow the rules and to be very polite and to not interact with people much. I've been to Japan. It's very distanced, socially distanced, you might say, as evidence of why a homogenous culture is good, and not just why, in this particular instance, those cultural predilections helped stem the spread. Obviously, not perfectly, but it did help. At least a little bit.
With or without the coronavirus, in March, hay fever season is already in full swing, and there is already a culture of wearing masks in Japan.
Oh, well, there you go. I didn't want to say that because that's kind of a racial stereotype that, you know, Asian people wear masks all the time anyway, like that's a standard. But yeah, if hay fever is a big problem in Japan, which apparently it is, Black Pigeon Speaks lives in Japan. If masks are a common thing around this time in Japan anyway, then that would explain why it wasn't such an issue. They were already accustomed to taking the steps that people recommended if you had to go out in public. But even those don't make up for not isolating. And if back in, I mean, right around here is when Hokkaido is supposed to have released their state of emergency. Look what happened.
Very big misconception that many have in the West is that Asian people are wearing masks in an attempt to protect themselves from infection, while actually people wearing masks are being polite and trying not to sneeze on others, and when sick, attempting to not spread their infection. There's also already a custom of care.
Japan has a very good public health system, so if someone gets sick, they can go to the doctor and get help. I remember reading it was a story on Twitter or something, doesn't matter. A woman was in Japan for business and was deathly ill. It was like a really bad flu or something, needed medical attention imminently, and was terrified of going to the doctor because she didn't want to have a huge bill. Her friends or business associates she was in Japan with said, no, it's fine. Let's go to the doctor. Let's get you taken care of. And the bill she was afraid of paying, I think she ended up with like $150 bill all told for a procedure that would have cost thousands in America. So that's a big part of it. And again, a culture of personal hygiene, washing your hands after using the bathroom, washing your hands consistently, using hand sanitizer if that's not available. There's a lot of parts of Japanese culture that led to lessening the spread of it. But the fact that it's such a densely populated series of islands meant that it was inevitable that it was going to explode, and it did. It's just Black Pigeon Speaks chose a particular window of time to make this video. I wonder if he still stands by it.
Care when it comes to spreading viruses. And the Japanese are pretty clean people. Not only in their cities, which for anyone that has visited will tell you they're probably the cleanest on the planet, but also Japanese people are very thorough in washing their hands. Japanese not only wash their hands at higher rates than Europeans, but hand sanitizer has long awaited people upon arriving at a variety of businesses in the country. Also, there is the built-in cultural aspects of the Japanese that, unlike the Italians, and I would venture that their well-earned stereotype of being overly emotional, well, the Japanese, in contrast, do not have a culture of handshakes, hugs, air kisses, or overly active speaking that increases unintended spitting. Japanese people don't like touching each other much either. They also...
Yeah, they're very isolated. This is actually a big sociological problem in Japan, that people in Japan feel very isolated and they have trouble making connections because it's not considered proper to be demonstrative or to, you know, especially as Western media has spread more and more over the last 50 years, and they see how Western people interact with their friends and family, it's perfectly understandable for people to feel isolated, realizing that they can never have that with their friends and family because it just wouldn't be okay. I mean, I'm not saying Western culture is better than Japanese culture or anything stupid like that. But I am saying that, yes, they have an isolationist culture, and this could help mitigate the spread of COVID-19.
Bow. When it comes to culture, the Japanese are a very stoic people when it comes to crisis, and I have seen this on several occasions living in the country. The Japanese have dealt with all manner of catastrophe for centuries. War, but more regularly, natural disasters that happen so often that they are pretty much accepted as a part of life. Now, I can already read the comments along the lines of, "Geez, the weeb is strong with this one, Felix." Or that I'm putting the country on some kind of pedestal. It's neither. These are just my observations. The country, of course, has problems. All countries do. Lots of them. But when looking at the reaction to crisis, I think the West could take a page out of the Japanese playbook. Also, this isn't to say that Japan is better or the best. It's just different. I myself am a Westerner, but for the moment I'm stuck here. Actually, in fact, I was planning to leave Japan this spring and return to the West, but that move, like everything else, has been put on hold. So there, take these observations for what they are, rather than see them as some sort of pissing test between civilizations. So then, the biggest observation I can make, and probably the most important, is that unlike the polar...
This is a non sequitur, okay? Unity is our greatest strength because it brings new ideas and new capabilities and new knowledge to our country, to our culture. I've said this before and I'll say it again. Anyone who tries to claim that diversity does not bring strength to our culture doesn't understand the great impact that non-white immigrants have had on our culture. So when he goes on to argue that the homogenous nature of Japanese culture is responsible for its great response to COVID-19 and how it's not a problem, two things. One, there's still a dominant culture, and if the culture has positive effects like the hygiene of the Japanese people proves beneficial, it's still going to hold on to it. And also remember this chart.
West. The Japanese are pretty much a unified people. They see unity as their strength in contrast to the West. Well, not really the West, but financial media and political elite in their pursuit of globalization. These people advocate that diversity and...
I wonder if he realizes that without the globalization we have, he would not be able to live in Japan the way he does. Like, Japan was incredibly isolated for decades, centuries, before, what was it, Admiral Cook showed up in Tokyo Bay and said, by the way, you're going to trade with us now, or we're going to take what we want, whether you like it or not. And that led, by the standards of the time, to the greatest period of prosperity and imperialism in Japanese history. Oh, funny that.
And the more dissimilar people are and divided into different communities and then all have to live together in the same space, this is advocated to be Western nations' ultimate strength. And when civilizational stress tests like the coronavirus pop up, as they always do and always will do, places like Japan can easily work together as they're not polarized, diverse, and distrustful of each other while living in atomized communities. And in outcomes, you can see for yourself which is actually stronger for a society, diversity or unity. So then, the Japanese not only have habits that I think, in my opinion, should be quickly adopted everywhere, including less touch.
Yeah, there are some good things about Japanese culture, but they're not the solution to COVID-19. I mean, yes, I'm sure he's going to talk about we should avoid touching people, we should avoid, we should wash our hands more, we should use hand sanitizer more, we should wear masks more. Sure, all good things. But do we want to adopt the xenophobia of Japanese culture? I mean, I know Black Pigeon Speaks does, but, is that what we want to adopt? Do we want to adopt the extremely rigid hierarchy where you can't really talk back to your higher ups or your boss or your father or what have you? Again, I know Black Pigeon Speaks answer, and I know my answer. They're different ones.
Touching of other people and more washing of hands, but more critically and more importantly for Western people is to see through the delusion that they have been force-fed for the last 30-odd years and start seeing unity rather than diversity as a strength.
The problem is unity and diversity are not mutually exclusive. We've seen throughout history diverse groups of people unifying around a common cause. That's the entire theory of socialism, that we're all united by class, regardless of our race or gender or religious preference, sexual preference, whatever. We're all united by class. And that when we recognize that and unite as a class, as the worker class, proletariat, whatever word you want to use to describe it, we can create a better world. The problem is, Black Pigeon Speaks doesn't want to create unity across lines. He thinks the only way you can create unity is with people who look like you.
Nobody can say for certain what will happen, and Japan might also fall victim to the coronavirus and have to itself go under lockdown.
I'm sorry, nothing to do with what he just said. This is just something that bothers me when people claim false dichotomies of, like, I went over that video a few days ago. We saw this during the Cold War, this pitting socialism or communism against not capitalism, but democracy. Or the idea of unity versus diversity. The opposite of unity is not diversity, it's division. The opposite of diversity is homogeneity. Now, obviously, in Black Pigeon Speaks' mind, unity and homogeneity they go hand in hand. They're one and the same. But time and time again throughout history, we have seen diverse groups unify. So I don't think this is the argument you want to make here, because it's a bad one. But I don't think Black Pigeon Speaks makes any other kind.
Lockdown. But should it have to, there will be no fear of increased crime, of looting, or the need to stock up on ammunition. As a unified society, they don't turn on each other in times of adversity. And I, again, have seen this myself up close and personal. All of that having...
Right, because Japan has a strong culture of unity and, most importantly, subordination to the power. Whether it's the shogun or the state or the emperor or whatever. They have that strong culture of subordination, which creates a form of unity. I mean, I'm not going to deny that does it. But it's not the only way, and I would argue not the best way to create unity. I think the best way to create unity is find a common cause, a common belief, a common opinion, whatever. Find something you have in common and use that to unite around. Because then you can have the biggest tent possible. Whereas if you limit it to racial similarities, sexual similarities, religious similarities, I mean, you kind of cap your tent.
Having been said, being a unified rather than a diverse and divided country, Japan has perhaps one of the best universal healthcare systems in the world and is much better situated to handle an outbreak than its peers. It has about 13 hospital beds per 1,000 people. the highest among the group of 7 nations, and more than triple the rate for Italy, the US, the UK, and Canada, and that's according to World Bank data. Even if there isn't as much testing in Japan as there is in other countries, or if they're fudging the numbers, hospitals aren't being stretched to their breaking point as they are in Italy and other countries that are currently combating this outbreak. Actually, the hospitals in Japan are not even being stressed currently. Maybe policymakers in the West might take...
I don't think I really need to say this, but again, this video came out a month ago, and since then Japan's numbers have spiked. So let's find out. Is Japan's medical system being stressed? Hey, look at that. April 2nd. So a week and a half later, warn of healthcare collapse in Japan if virus keeps spreading. So, yeah. Okay.
Take notice on what a unified society can accomplish when put into a stress test, and compare and contrast it with the response in their own countries. To do so would at least be a sign that the elite are not as cognitively challenged when it comes to reality as they currently outwardly appear to be. It would be a social good, but I'm not holding my breath. The delusions, it would appear, that Western society has gaslit itself with for decades will only die hard. And to end it off, remember everyone, stay safe and listen to your nation's medical experts. Thanks very much for watching. If you liked this video, please consider subscribing. Right. Also, I've started a Telegram chat group, and if you'd like...
Oh, a Telegram. Bitch, I'm surprised he is still on Patreon. I am not lying. Most of them get kicked off. Diversity is the most destructive red herring the West has ever been deluded with. Japan's lack of white left dingbats shouting down common sense has done them some good. Yeah, the result is that they have a really strong fascist community there, which, you know, awesome. Have you noticed that just lately we don't hear people saying religion of peace, open borders, diversity is our strength, grooming gangs? Because we have other things to worry about right now. Look, I don't give a shit about Islam. But if you're going to keep talking shit about it, I'm going to push back because I don't like people lying. Always felt safe and clean in Japan. People may seem distant, but they are genuinely polite and not pushy. I mean, yeah, again, the culture encourages people to be polite in public. So they have a lot of practice of being genuinely polite. During the tsunami problems of 2011, local Japanese made efforts to assist stranded Westerners. Sitting in a public waiting area for a train in Narita, I watched teenagers' behavior at the McDonald's. There was a fundraising going on, and the kids, after cleaning their tables, donated money in an open container. Nobody stole any cash, even as no one was looking. That would have never happened in diverse LA or New York City. I mean, yes, again, there are a lot of good things about Japanese culture, but they don't need diversity to divide people, make them easier to control. It's so funny the way these fucking fascists and reactionaries keep coming out with coming so close to realizing the problem. And they just won't go over the edge. They won't accept the problem. Hey, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed the show. If you liked it, like, share, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thank you. See you next time.